What's going on, gamers? It's Phil H here from Beneath the Veil and welcome back to the channel. This week we're doing a follow-up to last week's video focusing on 7 habits of highly effective core players. So for those who haven't seen last week's video, the goal of this video is to highlight certain holistic aspects that will make you a better player overall regardless of which specific position you're playing. I've tried to focus these concepts around things that are important to every single core player, whether that be the position 1 hard carry, the position 2 mid player, or position 3 offlaner. First important factor is mastering lane equilibrium. A lot of lower elo players tend to think that the burden of this job is all on the supports and they control the lane through stacking and side pulling. What support should be doing is using that as a tool to fix the lane when you're unable to, as a core player, adequately control the lane. So as you can see here, this is a replay of Nisha. He is, as Puck, abusing the fact that it's a ranged versus melee lane, so whenever a Shaker steps up, he's looking to punish him and deal damage. He's doing other things in terms of controlling vision as well, but that's besides the point. A good thing to know about creep equilibrium is that if you attack an enemy hero, if you issue an attack command within 600 range of a creep unit, they will aggro to you. There are ways that you can use this to your advantage. You can do things like aggroing the creep wave back onto your range creep to deny it quicker so that the lane pushes in towards you. Other things you can do as a melee hero, so you can see that the Earthshaker is starting to do it as well, is that you can creep aggro to pull the creeps back when they're nearing last hit range. So what he's doing there is he's pulling them back and then he's using his enchant totem to secure the last hit. That is a way that you can counteract some of that harass, is that you want to use creep aggro to pull them back so that then you can start getting safer last hits on the creeps. Another thing to consider, as we talked about in the support video last week, you should be, as a core player, keeping an eye on the time as well, and then depending on what time it is, you want to be trying to shove the wave wherever possible so that you can then rotate to get objectives to capitalize. So for example, with Puck, since he's got a bottle, he'd want to do things like shove the wave so that then he can fall away to top up his bottle either via the water runes or the bounty runes, and then that way he's minimizing the amount of XP that he's potentially missing out on. Tip number 2 is capitalizing on power spikes. As you can see here, I've skipped forward to 10 minutes in. Nisha's already destroying this game. He's 5-0-5 10 minutes in, but that's because he's, obviously higher ranked, so he's got a team that's much more active around the map to help him take advantage of all of his different power spikes. So you have power spikes not only in your abilities, right? So for Puck, when Dream Coil comes online at level 6, that's a power spike, but he's also now got this power spike of the Witch Blades. That's something you want to be playing around and thinking about, and this can manifest in different ways depending on the role that you're playing. Mid and offlane players, that's normally your first major item, is going to be something that will have significant impact on the game. Nisha's case has got a Witchblade here. If you were to look at an offlaner, they've normally got something like probably like a blade mail in this case, or a blink dagger, anything like that. They want to be looking to make plays around it, and they communicate with their supports adequately about that so that they can start preparing for those power spikes, right? Other things to think about is that with position 1 players, normally they'll want a farming item first, which we'll cover in a moment, but that can also be really important to communicate to your team, so that if you're a hero that doesn't take stacks very well initially, but you're working towards a farming item, you're getting reasonably close to it, that's a time where maybe 2 to 3 minutes before that item timing comes online, your supports could start stacking some camps for you so that you can then get immediate value out of that item power spike. So tip number 3 is shoving creep waves intelligently. As you can see here, Nisha's shown a sort of movement that's in particular sort of special to Puck because of the elusive nature of the way that their abilities interact. If we just pull back a little bit here, you'll see that at the moment, Nisha doesn't have any information on enemy positions. His bot lane is shoved almost to the tier 2, which would normally warrant some sort of response. The top lane has been pushing towards the tier 1 and is now starting to come back. And then you've got no real info mid about what's currently going on, right? So with Puck, the way that you can play it is that you can normally jump in and then you can burst a creep wave, and then you can, as part of your combo, you can then use your jaunt ability off the back of Illusory Orb. So what he'll probably end up doing is jumping in, and then he'll use Waning Rift and then Illusory Orb and then jaunt out. You can see here, this is a super conservative way for him to jump in and then shove a creep wave and then get out again. And this is something that is really good when you're playing these elusive heroes, but for other heroes who don't have this sort of mobility aspect to them, you have to be a little bit more careful about the way that you do shove waves. So generally best practice is that you only want to be shoving waves once you've got adequate information about enemy positions on the minimap, and then you would look to push out the wave and then wait until the next creep wave meets to see if anybody's going to come and contest it, and then if not, you jump out and then shove the next wave. It's very typical, and you'll see it all the time if you pay attention in pro games, whether that be any of the majors or the DPC league. You'll notice that unless they've got these safety nets in terms of mobility to get in and get out, then generally they're always looking to wait until they have adequate information on the minimap to know that they're safe to push out a lane. Otherwise, as you can see here, he's using his abilities and keeping his blink dagger up so that if he were to get gone on, then he could just escape, right? And habit number 4 of highly effective core players is itemizing for impact. As you can see with Nisha here, he went first item Witchblade, and then he went Blink, and then he ended up going Kyre and Sunch. In the case of mid players, you want to generally be going some first item significant either damage or utility item. So in this case, that's what the Witchblade is doing. It's a damage item that also gives some defensive qualities to it. And then his second item is a movement item in this case, and utility out of the Blink, so you can play Blink initiation for the big Dream Coil initiations and stuff like that, or Dream Coil counter initiations. And then he went Kyre and Sunch because that gives him additional spell damage as well as defensive prowess out of the Sunch, right? So typically you want, some sort of movements or damage item and then some sort of defensive item. In some case, you'll go 2 sort of movement and damage items and then defensive item. Sometimes you'll go movement item straight into a defensive item. It depends on the enemy team and what you need. And the biggest mistake that low elo players will make is that they'll itemize the same regardless of hero matchups. If you want to have really big impact in your games, you need to be thinking about what utility your team has and what items your team is already building, and then how you can build items to empower your own hero as well as empower the rest of your team, right? It's the same with support heroes going Glimmer Cape or Force Staff and things like that. They want to buy things that will help either save their allies or give them more power. Same with Veil of Discord, right? Amplifies all spell damage. You want to be doing that as a core. You want to either be amplifying your own damage, your team's overall damage, or you want to be suppressing the enemy team's impact. For offlaners, you normally want to start with either a movement or a defensive item. It's been very popular lately to be picking up a Vanguard as a first item, but there are some heroes where they want to pick up a fast blade mail, which is a defensive item. Some heroes that want to pick up a quick blink dagger, which is a movement item. Some heroes, will go straight up for a boots of travel so they can be more active on the map. It really depends on what your team needs, but typically offlaners will want some sort of movement or defensive item, and then they'll want some sort of utility item, which is normally one of 2 that they've missed out in the first stage, and then they'll go into either harder lockdown items, or they'll go something to tank up and continue to be able to frontline for their team, or something to build an aura for the team, for example, so that everybody can sustain more. With position 1 players, what they'll normally want to do is they'll want to get some sort of farming item first to expedite their GPM, and then they'll want to get some sort of defensive item next. And then after that, that's when they want to start transitioning into either movement items or hard utility items or damage items. So that can vary depending on what hero you're playing. Sometimes you want to pick up something like a Force Staff if you're a ranged hero so that you can get yourself out of certain positions and continue to create space and build that into a Hurricane Pike, which will give you damage as well. Other times, you might get a farming item and a Maelstrom, and then you might want to build something like a BKB for a defensive item or Vanguard for a defensive item, and then you want to transition back into something like a Mjolnir could count as a damage item, and that's can be nice because it gives you additional attack speed to complement your GPM being increased from the Maelstrom itself, and then that also gives you, if you're dealing with a lot of illusions, for example, it gives you a way to deal with that large amount of illusions coming at you. So these are all things to consider and change as game goes on. You might want a different farming item depending on what the game is and what heroes you're playing against, and there are just some heroes who always go certain farming items because of the way that the hero inherently plays. Another thing to consider is that if you're playing a hero that's got an innate farming ability as part of their skills, then you can oftentimes forego the farming item and instead build things like attack speed or build agility based items to increase your attack speed so that you get the most out of that innate skill that you already have. It's a big mistake normally to build additional farming items on top of an innate farming ability, just because it's effectively a redundancy that you're creating, where you could better invest that gold into something that gives you more overall impact. So habit number 5 is what I've called supporting your support. This is really important, especially in 7.33. I mean, arguably in the way that they've been slowly changing the meta of Dota over the last year, 2 years, it's become less and less impact out of increasing a GPM through CSing, and has instead been a large emphasis placed on bounty and gold exchanges happening through team fights, right? It's now become more important than ever that core players really lean on their supports and help lift up their support and help play around them so that they're getting a lot of impact, and then they're also, as a result, getting an increase in GPM, right? As you can see in these Immortal games, you know, it's not even 30 minutes yet, and there's already been 58 kills that have happened, 59. So within 30 minutes, there's, you know, now been 60 kills. So it's really high impact. There's 2 kills happening a minute. So it's really important that you don't get into this mode as a core player that I just need to CS and, you know, you stop playing around the team. Yes, it is important that you do CS and clear creeps and all that sort of stuff. And you can see that all of these players, whenever they're not fighting on the map, their first instinct is to then go and farm a camp or push out a wave or do something like that. But it is really important that you're playing around your supports and enabling their gameplay as well. So it's really important for mid and offlane players in the earlier stages of the game, so, you know, around that sort of 7-minute timing, for example, that you're starting to think about once that first wisdom rune comes online and your supports are getting close to their level 6 power spike, that you start playing around them more and more. For offlaners, that can look like helping your position 4 set up deep vision, and then same with position 2 as well. For position 1, that can look to be things like when your supports are naturally rotating to you to help set up vision or something like that, you need to fight around them and help hold that vision that they're creating for you, and then look to capitalize whenever your opponents present you an opportunity to kill them, right? So that's not always, you know, overstepping and chasing and overcommitting and getting out of position, but it's quite often just simply playing around the resources that you've been set up with and then capitalizing on them, and then the moment that there's downtime, you go back to CSing, shoving waves, you know, stacking camps and all that sort of stuff. That's really critical. I debated putting this at the very top and then debated putting it at the very last, and then I figured actually it fits more nicely into this sort of 5th position where you've got a few other things under your belt first, and then you're starting to look to play around them more and more. If you watch any, you know, Immortal ranked pub game, you'll notice that from pretty early on, the position 2 and position 3 especially are just playing around the supports constantly, and it's really enabling the supports to snowball. It's giving them extra gold, which means that they get their items quicker. They're much more likely and much more happy to go invest gold into those support items. So setting up vision, countering vision, getting things like 4 staffs, because you're being inherently selfless in the way that you're playing the game, and you're helping them succeed as well. You know, at the end of the day, Dota is a team game. If you're setting up your allies for success, they're much more likely to want to help set you up for success as well. And instead of being, you know, that big dragon on the horde of gold who's saying, you know, every little inch of the map is mine because I've got farm priority, if you're instead doing things like roaming around with a support player and you decide that nothing's going on, so you're farming a camp, you might ping out one ahead of you and say, hey, you go and farm this camp, and then if we get jumped, you can just leave. That's enabling them to get a little bit more GPM as well, which will end up helping them snowball even harder and harder and make your game easier and easier. Habit number 6 is playing around objectives and playing really actively around them. There wasn't a lot of good examples in this game of that because Nisha's team were just grouping up and killing the enemy team the whole time and not really looking to play around those major objectives like Tormentors or Roshan, for example, because their team composition doesn't have any naturally good Roshan takers, and the only shard that they really needed was their Witch Doctor's Voodoo Switcheroo, so he just purchased it. And they just carried on, you know, absolutely decimating the enemy team. But that's something that's really important to think about, and a really good way to, again, you know, support your supports is playing around those major objectives coming online, helping those, you know, create those natural advantages. You know, 1400 gold on a support 20 minutes into the game is not something to be sniffed at. So, you know, playing around that first Tormentor timing, and, you know, then maybe around the second one that goes to, the first one is pretty much always guaranteed to go to one of the supports. So that can be huge for most games. Most of those are super helpful. And then same thing with Roshan, right? If you've got a hero like Ursa, a hero like Troll, you know, any hero that likes to naturally take those early Roshans, coordinating with them and playing around them can give you natural advantages in terms of, there are bounties associated with taking these objectives, as well as if you were to sync up with a support to help take the 14-minute wisdom rune, for example, or the 21-minute wisdom rune. If you can secure both of those by taking the enemy's one away from them and then securing your own, that can be what tips you over the edge into a winning game or a losing game. And making sure that you're coordinating with your team to help leverage those advantages is what's going to really help you excel and take your game to the next level. And then habit number 7 is leveraging every advantage that you can get. So as you'll see here, there's going to be a big team fight that breaks out. So you can see there, they've traded 2 for 3 and then have made, 2 of their cores burn TPs to get away. And then off the back of this, they're looking to leverage that advantage, right? So they're pushing out waves, and then they're looking to continue to just create this pressure on the map and then take away map control as a result. Their Witch Doctor has a gem that he's using to deward. Nisha's gone back mid to help push out this wave. But it's the biggest thing that low elo players make the mistake of, is that whenever they have this inherent advantage, especially, the most classic one is a position 1 player who turns up for a fight. They have a slight advantage at the end of it, and then they go, well, that was good, and then they go back to farming, right, passively, and they don't look to create and push that momentum. And then whether that be putting damage on a tower or even taking a tower or taking a rack, something like that, they're not looking to eke out all of those small advantages that they're being given by winning those engagements. So you can see here, even though the enemy team is respawning, Nisha is still very aggressively pushing, and then he's looking to settle outside of the enemy team's base, trying to contain them in as much as possible, because that's more map control that they can then leverage, right? So they're going to create this inherent advantage, right? They're going to get free 1400 gold effectively, plus the bounty that it gives for taking it. So there you go, he's got his shard for free. Not a particularly amazing one, but you also deny it from the enemy team. And now they can look to, again, create advantages based off of that. There's something really important to consider, is that the biggest mistake for core players is you don't need to be 6-slotted to win the game. I could tell you many stories of me as a support player. We win the game and I have like Greaves, and that is it. If I play something like a Chen. There are so many games that can be won just by simply pushing off the back of winning engagements, because if there's nobody there to defend, then you just get free damage or you burn a fortification or something like that, right? And then the biggest thing is just once people start to respawn and the major kill threats are back online, that's when you have to respect the fact that they can hold and then fall back. But otherwise, don't be afraid to post up and look for these picks, because more often than not, these are immortal level players and they're still making mistakes. You can be guaranteed that in your elo, they're going to be not bringing enough defense to certain areas of the map, or overcommitting, and then you can either engage or, disengage accordingly. But yeah, this game doesn't go on a whole lot longer. As you can see, Nisha's 18, 3, and 22 at this point, so he's absolutely destroyed this immortal level pub. If you follow these habits, I'll get the editors to put them all back up on the screen towards the end, as we did for last week as well. Best thing to do is just work from the top, right? So spend 10 to 20 games just focusing on the first aspect, and then once you feel like you've got that in the back of your head and you've got a really good understanding, then look to incorporate the next one, and so on and so forth. And then you'll find that, in your next 100 to 200 games, you will just naturally climb, because you've got all of these things just ingrained into the back of your head that you're not having to think about them actively anymore. Hope that helped. As always, leave a comment in the comments below if there's anything that you'd like me or one of the other members of the team to clarify. And besides that, we'll see you in the next video.